Every time I've been asked what was the most challenging aspect of mounting the movie production-wise, and I say, oh, it was how we were going to do the look of Mars, the exterior of Mars.
I was very concerned that we make it look like the stuff we've seen from Mars already, and it should really look real.
It had to be something you believed in, because if it didn't, the whole feeling of the story was destroyed.
We were trying to create a very hostile, dry, forbidding landscape that also was compelling in its vista and its size.
We have enough science fiction movies out there with flubber-like monsters running across icy desert, whatever terrain you want, gobbling people up. The reality is terrifying enough. You have to do no more.
I was trying to create spaces that in some way had a familiarity that people would go, you know, I've seen Apollo missions, I've seen stuff on CNN about the space shuttle, so this feels real.
He has created an amazing world. Inspired by what is really going on in the space program, what NASA really looks like, it has a certain elegance and beauty to the design. Yes, it looks like real hardware, but it's also beautiful.
Cinematographer and a production designer both have to be in sync about what's going to happen and how the picture is going to look.
I'm very visual, obviously, and so of course the first thing that happens is that as I'm reading the script, I'm getting visual images that are coming to my head, and I might even just take notes or do little sketches on the back pages or whatever, and then I begin to get an idea of what I think the overall look is going to be.
I never enjoy visual effects just gratuitously there for their own sake. It's always the most rewarding to work on a sequence where the effects are very much in the service of the story.
It's what I call a hardware film, meaning that everything that you show has to be constructed, built, or visualized in some way, because once you leave Earth, which represents about the first 5 minutes of the film, everything else is created. So those are the biggest challenges that we have at first, is pre-visualization of what this film might look like.
The animatics were a tool for getting everybody on the same page so we knew what we were doing. Part of it was to help Brian visualize the sequences, and part of it was for the visual effects people who would take those images and manipulate them to get the final effect in the visual effects shots. When we were done, before any camera had rolled, we had a sequence of the shots as they were intended to be, and as those shots were executed by the production team, I would take that and plug it into this spine, replacing the animatic with the live shot. These sequences, which take a few minutes to watch, actually took weeks and weeks to shoot. Replacing the animatics, the sequences came to life.
DreamQuest Images built a 22-foot practical model of the Mars 2 recovery ship. Brian De Palma loves to have those long, sweeping shots. So to get the detail and the perspective on that correct, Hoyt Yateman decided to build that as a practical model.
The reason I chose that is because of the length of the shots. Again, we're doing a film that resembles more of 2001, where the shot times run in excess of 30 to 60 seconds in length, which is actually a very long time for today's effects arena.
One of the big conversations I was having with the miniature cinematographer was how we were going to bring the spaceship into the frame. You'll notice in the picture that it very rarely comes in just across the frame. It always came in from a different angle. That was just to add visual variety to the picture, and it's a way of treating the spacecraft that people haven't seen in movies before.
So we had a 22-foot recovery model that was on a very large model mover and shot actually in this stage with more traditional motion control technology.
When Woody is outside in the meteorite sequence looking for the hole in the hull breach, that's a computer graphics astronaut with a practical model of the ship and a digital 3D model of Mars. So we've got a lot of blends of techniques in all these shots.
It's always very important to orient an audience in terms of the spatial reality of what they're experiencing. And weightlessness and also no up from down is almost impossible to communicate because we're so used to gravity that we can't think of a world without gravity.
The biggest challenge on cinematography for Mission to Mars was weightlessness. You have to show people in relationships to the set that makes the audience feel that they're weightless. And the way we did it was that you never did anything that was level. We would hang people upside down, we would use the camera upside down, we would always move the camera, and that gives the audience the feeling of weightlessness.
You all right?
It's hard.
And these shots in zero-G are very difficult to accomplish. You have to hang actors by wires in suits that are uncomfortable. If you have an actor who has a tobacco habit, which we did, they would have to be cut down every 40 minutes or so and let outside so they could have a smoke. Bathroom breaks had to be coordinated, and it's a big deal to get somebody out of the suit just for that. And it was a very difficult process to shoot all these sequences of the actors in the suits.
We had always envisioned the idea of a section of the spaceship that went to Mars having artificial gravity. First of all, we thought it would look cool. And second of all, just from a production point of view, we didn't want to have to shoot the entire second act of the movie with the actors constantly on wires.
The Wheel of Cheese was a cylinder set. Gary Elmendorf, our special effects supervisor, he built a steel framework for us, and the set fits inside, and then the whole thing rotates.
It's 36 feet in diameter, and it weighs approximately 66,000 pounds. It's basically a friction wheel on a gear-reduced hydraulic motor.
And it needed to be built in a way where all the pieces of it worked. The lighting needed to work, the set needed to work, the actors needed to be able to walk completely around inside it.
If you're in a space station or you're in a spaceship, you're going to see all the walls and all the ceiling. There's no place to put any movie lights, so you have to build in lights. And the lights have to seem logical, and they have to be in the right place to also have dramatic effect. They had to light the people in the sets so they looked good. They had to seem like they belonged there. Everything had to have its own logic, so it didn't disrupt from the dramatic flow of the picture.
And then Brian designed a shot, one of his classic long tracking shots, that hopefully would show the audience how this set worked. And that's the shot where the camera pulls out from the center and drops down, and we see Connie at a certain station. We hear the music start to play, and she starts to walk out, and then we see Jerry, and then we see Gary as we pick up and come around.
We had a device called a Super Technicrane that Panavision rents, and we had a special camera head that had 4 axes. You could pan it, you could tilt it, you could turn it around, and it was shooting straight down. You could shift it from side to side.
And watching the crane work to follow these different people around while this huge set was rotating at about 6 RPMs was as much of a ballet. I mean, it was like watching the guys move the crane back and forth and watching the operator changing the head and all that. It was really inspiring.
And for that shot, which we rehearsed for a day, the mechanical effects people had to figure out a way to rig the actors into the set. The guy who had it tough was Gary, because in that shot, he never gets up. So he's strapped into his chair, and he just goes round and around and around while we were shooting. That shot took a day to shoot.
It is much harder to do long sustained takes, but I also think it's much more satisfying because with a long take, you can let the actors interact with each other. You have the actors' timing that you don't have when a sequence is cut up, and their relationships with each other is a much more interesting thing to do.
One of the challenges of the movie was to create the surface of Mars here on Earth. A great deal of the movie takes place on the surface of Mars in bright daylight, Martian daylight.
One of Brian De Palma's ideas was that we actually create the Mars landscape inside on a soundstage.
But when we looked around in Vancouver, there was just not any space that was big enough to take care of this situation. So we went back to kind of a modified plan, and that was to do it outside.
And we found, just south of our stage, a 300-acre sand pit that had been created when the Fraser River was dredged in the port of Vancouver. And it had an unobstructed horizon line, no vegetation whatsoever.
We actually built the surface of Mars out of the sand, pushed around by a bunch of bulldozers, and we built these berms to mask the trees and to mask the horizon line so we could put all of our people against them. And then got a bunch of this crushed rock from Manitoba and dumped it all over the surface.
We brought in different types of rock, volcanic rock, bigger rocks, that hopefully matched what a Martian terrain would look like.
Then we stabilized it all with this gray concrete that was the color of Mars. Then we had the paint crew come in, and they used about 14,000 gallons of biodegradable paint to do the final paint job.
The only problem with doing it outside is that on Mars, the atmosphere is kind of like, as JPL said, a smoggy day in Los Angeles. So that means that there's no blue in the shadows. You had to have red in the shadows of the people's outfits. So one of my problems was how I was going to fill in the blue shadows and make them golden. And I was watching one of those PBS building shows, and I saw these guys putting on a copper roof. And I went, wait a minute, if I got copper reflectors and put them into the blue shadow area, it would just fill it right in. We made regular movie reflectors out of copper, and we just used the reflectors to fill in the shadows. And it worked wonderfully.
Of course, every time we shot, in each shot, we had to digitally treat the sky, the background.
How do you create a Martian sky? Well, when you're inside a set, we had large painted backdrops. But outside, there was really nothing we could do, so it was decided DreamQuest was going to have to digitally alter the color of the skies.
We worked very early on with Matt Golembeck from JPL, who's head of the Pathfinder mission, and he was extremely helpful in giving us real information on what the skies of Mars look like.
I tried to orient most of the shots so we were in backlight so the sky would be washed out. Then the visual effects people could change the sky. We also tried to put the astronauts' heads and any big elements below this horizon line so the effects people would have a very sharp line to work on, so they wouldn't have a lot of detail work in their matting system.
So a tremendous amount of digital work had to be done in extracting the edges of the mountains and the sets and then replacing that with a sky that was artificially created.
That's a long, endless process of tinkering with it to make it look real and authentic and at the same time dramatic.
Brian wanted our first shot of Mars to be stunning, to be a broad vista.
So it required a lot of matte painting work as well as computer graphics work. So what I call it was something from nothing. Many times, even though we shot on a set, what you see is 90% created in the computer. So in this case, it was a lot of pre-planning and pre-visualization that allowed us to actually go through and execute this.
Then he came up with the idea of intercutting Gary Sinise's character, imagining himself putting the first footprint on Mars, which he was not going to do, to cut to his point of view of his foot on Earth to the same point of view on Mars. And it was a complicated shot because we had to shoot a little piece of ground of the Ares 8, the remote-controlled Martian vehicle, and pull back from it.
As the little Ares makes its way out toward the distant horizon, the camera tilts up and looks, and you get your really first view of Mars. That was a difficult shot to do because obviously, again, we're working in a limited location where we have a small area, maybe of 100 square foot, that's been dressed to look like Mars. Yet we want to produce this 100-mile visibility of this huge expanse. Then later back at DreamQuest, what we did, using 3D, we built geometry, in other words, physical pieces that exist in the virtual world where the mountain peaks and where the boulders would be in 3 space. And then using illustrations and photographs, we actually mapped those images like decals onto those virtual shapes, producing a 3-dimensional environment that's actually made up of paintings and photographed images.
And so some of our matte paintings are put together using rocks from Jordan, terrain from the Canary Islands, and paintings from someone's imagination.
I think the biggest challenge on Mission to Mars was the creation of the vortex sequence. And the reason for that is that we're creating a completely synthetic environment. This is a sequence where there's a raging sandstorm, rocks are flying, ground flow's happening, astronauts are being sucked up into tornadoes. Most of it, if not all of it, is done in the computer.
We wanted to make it look as organic as possible. Like this was an act of nature, but it was also a scary creature-like essence to this effect.
The vortex was rendered to be a predator. It starts out as kind of a curious entity. One of the images we were using was War of the Worlds. If you look at the sequence where the canisters land for the very first time and the little probe comes out and kind of looks around, that image, kind of a serpentine image, was something that Brian was very fond of.
DreamQuest had a program which I think they had designed for Armageddon called the Hookah program, which is a particle system CG software program that worked exactly perfectly for designing and executing the vortex.
The Hookah software was the particle renderer that was used to actually create that. Creating particles in a computer where you have literally many, many millions of particles that have to be rendered. These renders take anywhere from maybe 7 to 2 weeks to render. That's another big challenge. You have supercomputers running something for 2 weeks to get something out. So it becomes very difficult to light, it becomes very difficult to animate and to give the final look until you actually do it.
In this shot, an astronaut gets sucked up into the vortex and he gets spinning around. Obviously, stuntmen love to do stuff like that, but with the way this guy spins you, there was no real practical way to do it. So for this thing, we used a CG astronaut because it might have been too dangerous to use a real stuntman.
It's intense, it's dramatic, it's surprising, it's scary, and it's completely invented from the filmmaker's imagination. Brian wanted to design something that looked like a sleeping goddess, something that was serene and beautiful and beckoning, because the idea was that these were our ancestors and that the artifact that they left behind should feel peaceful to us, should feel welcoming.
What I was trying to do was to keep it as minimal as possible. So rather than trying to show artifacts from some Martian civilization that in the end always looks like something from the Roman Empire or something out of Dinotopia, I thought, let's just make this like modern art. Let's make it really simple and clean.
Then when they go into the face, it was the story, the evolution of Mars, and how to portray that to the audience.
We had to find an idea for an unearthly space. So Ed came up with the idea of the white room, and Brian liked the idea.
Is it bright or just white?
To light the white room and to get rid of all the seams was a tricky proposition. It was like a giant trapezoid, using soft material, and we put our lights beyond that so you don't see any source at all.
In the planetarium scene, what we had to shoot with was basically a large black stage with a shiny black floor. The part that we added was the starfield background, the planets and the rings, and the Martian that appears.
And we played with different versions of that. Are the planets going to look real? Is the Martian real? Is she a spirit? Is she a hologram?
Brian had an image of this Martian, of this very tall, thin, elegant, friendly figure. One of the constraints in the design of the Martian was that she had to look familiar. She had to look sort of vaguely human because we have this genetic link between the Martians and the humans.
So we kind of toyed with the alien a little bit. I mean, she's very sort of realistic and she cries, and yet she doesn't have skin, she doesn't have pores, she doesn't have breath. So it's sort of, what do you want her to be?
In the end, Gary Sinise steps into this tube, which then magically transports him up to the top, and there's the ship waiting to send him off.
What we had on the stage was a live plate, Gary stepping into this tube. The camera pulls back as far as we had room to pull on the stage. We continued that zoom back in the computer, and we built the rest of the environment around him. Some of these long, thin Martian statues that are forming a ring around him. We had Gary rising up in the tube. We had the Martian ship up near the ceiling, big sort of swirling vortex of energy around that. And then as Gary gets up into the ship, the launch sequence really begins and we start to disintegrate the shell of the things. The shots in the launch sequence consist of several elements. To start with, we have the face, which was computer modeled. Then the face had to be procedurally broken up into thousands of little fragments. Then there's a swirling vortex of energy that's created with a custom particle system that we developed. Brian saw the Martian ship as being almost like a Brancusi sculpture with this gold finish. And to get that particular look is most easily achieved with computer graphics, especially in the launch shot where we had thousands of the ships launching simultaneously.
I'm very proud of the look of the movie, the fact that we've created this world, both a NASA real world, a Martian surface world, and a fantastical world. Each and all of them have a visual impact on the audience and hopefully take the audience someplace where they can't get otherwise.
was really trying to portray these amazing type events that were taking place, kind of spectacular things like vortexes and meteorite showers and the end of the Martian civilization, in a way that people would believe, and at the same time make an interesting visual film that was something different that people hadn't seen.
The picture's a very sweet picture. It talks about loyalty and commitment. If everybody would be a little more loyal to the Earth and to the universe, maybe we wouldn't be in such a mess that we're in now.
There are people who would give anything to go to Mars. This is a story about people who are like that. They are explorers. They are interested in pushing the boundaries of where we can go. And I hope that audiences will look at the film and think about that aspect of the human condition, that there are all these problems on Earth. Yes, it's true, but there's something in us that always wants to know what's over the next hill.
It's something that makes you feel really good about being a human being when you see men work together with such complicated technological inventions of men and do things that no man could ever thought possible.
Here are some of the elements that go into making the shot of VA-28. This is the dust element, the gritty sand element. This is the live-action plate that was shot. This is what we started with. Here's the roto putting them on black. Again, you can see the 3D elements that we're adding to the scene. We actually photo-roto a CG astronaut into position so the material flows around it. And this is the composite. This is one of the more complicated shots. This is the animatic that was done early on in the storyboarding process to give Brian an idea of what the sequence would look like. We use this as kind of a template to build the live-action moves that would be done eventually months later in Vancouver on the blue screen stage. This is a graphic representation of how the scene was done. You can see the motion control camera moving toward the astronaut in the airlock set, along with the outer ring carrying a big light that was used to light the sequence. Big light. I don't know how big was it. Was it 20K?
No, it was a 5K.
5K. This is the model photography that was done. Again, we're playing back a master move that was done virtually. This is a model photography shot on the motion control stage. This is the actual blue screen element of the last astronaut, including the airlock. And again, you can see how the motion control camera's rotation is slave to the rotation of the lights. The illusion is that they are tumbling and not the camera. Here you'll see the elements come together, the star field, then the CG door frame, the debris. Then you have the foreground astronauts, each one is separate, being matted in front of the other. Eventually the model ship, and then the umbilical cord that's done with computer graphics to tie them together.
This is the main model test, so we sculpted each of the creatures individually as a separate model, but all derived from the same topology. That means that each one of them actually has 2 arms and 2 legs and a long tail and a long neck, and then to make all the different creatures, they were sort of squished and mashed in and resculpted to be the different creatures, but they all start from the same topology. This is a simple test transitioning between each of the individual creatures to make sure that the in-betweens would work. These are individual animation cycles for the different creatures. To start with, this is how they were animated. Each creature was animated separately, just doing a walk cycle. When we got a walk cycle that we were happy with, then those were stuck end to end with transitions in between to get the creatures to all turn one into the other. Not only did all the actual geometry of the body have to be compatible, but all the skeletons had to be compatible with each other. So in fact, they're all actually the same skeleton. The joint lengths are all scaled appropriately to work for the different creatures. So this represents all the different models with all the different shape changes applied to them. And as you can see, some of the creatures on either end look pretty strange. But we have all of these creatures present in the animation file with all their animation shape changes rippling one through to the next. This is the master animation file for the evolution shot. This is just a gray plastic render to let us see exactly what the creature is doing and to determine that there's no foot slippage. Then this animation was replicated dozens of times throughout the sequence with small time offsets to represent the whole crowd of creatures.
What are you looking for?
Earth.
Hey, when we get back home, we really will have to try this out in the sim.
How are we doing on the fuel, Woody?
I'm at 50%. I don't see the Remo.
There it is. 45 left, 45 down.
Oh, Jesus. She's not where I thought she'd be.
We're gonna miss her. What do you think?
Can't catch it. Not like this.
Use the tether. You'll have 1, maybe 2 shots before she's out of reach.
Negative. It's too risky. If we miss it, we got nothing. I'll leave you the gun. Run a line out to the Remo. I got enough fuel left for that.
You'll be going too fast.
I'll aim to overshoot. Brake like hell and arc it in. Piece of cake. I'll see you in a flash. Unhook me.
Good to go.
Okay, I'm on a path to overshoot. I'm going to take the edge off. I'm out of fuel. Coming in hot. Still long. Abandoning the unit. I'll break with suit jets.
Jesus.
Suit jet's gone. I'm gonna make contact.
What velocity?
Impact's gonna be a little rough.
At what velocity?
32.
I'm gonna use the gun to slow you.
No. You slow me, I'll fall short.
It's too fast, Woody.
No choice. I'll be okay. Here we go. Gotcha.
Woody, what's your status?
Well, my suit jets are gone and I'm still carrying a good deal of velocity.
As soon as we get hooked up, I'll come get you.
I'd have to say negative on that, Jim.
Negative on the transmission?
No, I heard you. Negative on the maneuver. I am not retrievable.
What, are you not going that fast?
Well, it all comes down to the amount of fuel, honey. Suit jets are designed for attitude control, not travel. Retrieval just won't work.
Well, it's gotta work.
Hey, listen, I don't like it any more than you do.
Woody.
Run the numbers, Jim.
I am. You hang tight, Woody. We'll get in the Remo, drop her down, come scoop you up.
Sounds good, Jim.
It's gonna take us half an hour to get the Remo reoriented. Woody will be in the atmosphere by then.
Then we'll just have to get her moving faster.
We don't have time.
Listen to Jim, honey. It's a good plan.
No, we're gonna come get you.
Okay, get ready for brakes.
Come on now.
On my mark. 3.
You can do it.
2.
You can do it.
1.
Come on.
Mark.
Come on. Yeah.
Everybody good? We're on, Jim. As soon as I get the hatch open, let's start dumping the cargo. Come on. All right, it's open.
Terry, no!
Terry, you'll never make it.
Terry, what are you doing?
I'll tell you what I'm not doing, Woody. I'm not gonna watch you die.
Terry.
You do the same for me.
Phil, get inside, dump the cargo, and start the systems. Now!
No, I wouldn't. Not if it was impossible.
I can do it.
No, you can't. You don't have enough fuel to come get me and get us back. Listen to me, goddammit. You have to stop, and you have to stop now.
The hell I do.
What are you doing?
I'm gonna jet in a little closer and try again.
Terry, you spend any fuel getting closer, you won't get back. And if anyone tries to get you, they'll die too. Honey, please. Please go back. Go back and help the others to the surface.
I am not losing you.
I can't let you do it.
No.
I can't let you die. I'm sorry.
What are you doing?
Love you, honey.
No! Woody! Don't!
Come back, Terry. He's gone.
No. No.
Terry.
No.
We need you.
Wait. No. No.
Please, Terry.